to the Dean Obeidallah Show, and look who's here. It's our monthly guest, Andy Borowitz, writer, comedian, New York Times bestselling author, co-creator of the TV show Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and the Borowitz Report, which is now on Substack, and it's huge. It's one of the biggest things on Substack. So good to see you, Andy. Thanks for making time.
Thanks for having me back again, Dean. So much to discuss today.
There is, and we have the time to do it, which is kind of amazing. That's the beauty of long form radio. This would be like a 9-hour interview. There'll be dinner served, some costume changes. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's talk about your article. Andy writes satirical stuff that people don't know, plus also serious stuff now, because I subscribe. I see everything. But your article, Ghislaine Maxwell becomes only person in America who has not seen Trump act inappropriately, which is very funny. Tell us a little bit, before we talk about the serious stuff, let's just enjoy this. So tell us the genesis of this.
Well, the thing is, what people don't realize is that writing about this era comedically is actually kind of challenging because we're being fed this very absurd scenario. And my job as a comedian is to try to make things a little bit more absurd. And you can't do that here because I'll dream up the craziest thing that Trump could possibly do. And then 10 minutes later, he'll do that thing. So my news isn't fake, it's just early. And that really isn't the goal. And so what I sometimes try to do is I just try to take the lies that we're being fed at face value and then just work them out logically to their logical extreme. And that's what I did here because, of course, Todd Blanche, who American taxpayers are paying to be the second in command at the Department of Justice, but who's really, I would say, moonlighting as Trump's defense attorney, paid a little visit to Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, you're familiar with Ghislaine, aren't you?
Dean? Very familiar. We spent some time in middle school together. No, I mean, I've read a lot about her. I mean, I watched the whole documentary, The Filthy Rich. They did a sequel. So yeah, I'm pretty familiar with Ghislaine Maxwell.
Well, long before Ghislaine became such an important linchpin in the Department of Justice's case exonerating Donald Trump, she was better known as the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who was a fraudulent media baron. He was kind of a poor man's Rupert Murdoch in Britain. He considered himself sort of a rival of Rupert Murdoch, except that he was completely fraudulent. So he went bankrupt a whole bunch of times. He kited a lot of checks. He was actually from Czechoslovakia, which is unfortunate because he became known as the bouncing check, which is a terrible joke, also accurate. Not my joke, but it's very accurate. He disappeared mysteriously off the side of a boat, which, I think a lot of us would like to see happen to certain Supreme Court justices, but this actually happened to Robert Maxwell. So I sort of was steeped in Ghislaine Maxwell trivia before she became such a big part of the Trump story. Anyway, Todd Blanche, that was sort of a long sidebar. Todd Blanche visited her in custody a couple of weeks ago to really get the inside story on what was going on with Epstein. And she said some really incredible things. She said that she never saw Donald Trump act inappropriately and that he always acted like a perfect gentleman.
Yes.
Who was with him. So I just thought this was worthy of the Guinness Book of World Records because she is the only person in America who has never seen Donald Trump act inappropriately. I pointed out that if she were a resident, say, of Papua New Guinea and didn't have any access to media, maybe I would buy that she had never seen Trump act inappropriately. But it's sort of hard to buy in the United States of America where we're subjected to his inappropriate behavior kind of on a minute-by-minute basis.
Right.
But so that was really more, I would say that story was more just objective reporting on my part. It wasn't really me making things up, which is kind of what I've been reduced to now, Dean. I'm just kind of transcribing the reality, and it's already in its kind of source material form absurd enough that it doesn't really need much in the way of tweaking from the likes of me.
So you've gone from a satirical writer to an actual journalist now.
And thank God, because as you know, Dean, we don't have many journalists left in this country. They're all now working in the White House press office, essentially just obsequiously bowing to his every whim in a real disgraceful act. So I guess it's up to you and me, who we used to consider ourselves stand-up comedians. Now we are, what are we, Woodward and Bernstein? Is that who we are now?
And you can pick. I mean, I would like to be Woodward, but from the movie, not the real world. The Robert Redford character. The movie's cool, Bob Woodward now, I'm not a big fan. It's interesting though, Andy, this turns on what does the word inappropriate mean? Remember, like with Bill Clinton, what does that mean? Like this is what is inappropriate, because what the corporate media missed, and I played it on my show because I read a lot of the transcripts. I'm not kidding, Ghislaine Maxwell described Jeffrey Epstein as never doing anything inappropriate either. She said, no one ever complained to me he did anything inappropriate. She used the exact same word. There's no joke. That's literally, and you would have think corporate media would have played what you said about Trump and then played what you said about Epstein. And it would have been like, okay, this is just a joke, right? So you can't believe anything. And most people discount what she said, but she literally said no one ever told her that Jeffrey Epstein did anything inappropriate. In fact, at her trial, they said it right in front of her. And so she's an abject liar. But then again, maybe to her inappropriate is just, we define it differently.
Well, she also painted a very odd picture of Epstein and herself, because she made it sound like neither of them were having much in the way of sex. Epstein, she said, didn't, when he'd have a massage, I guess it was more like just kind of working out some muscles, like maybe tension in his shoulders or something like that. She said she also didn't have much sex. It seems like a visit to Lolita Island would be a way for somebody who's a sex addict to get over his addiction, because so little sex was going on there, practically none at all. It really seemed like Jeffrey Epstein was running some kind of a very fancy convent, from the description that she gave. So I don't know. Yeah, she was called in court like just an epic liar. So I don't know. The only person who I guess totally bought what she had to say was Laura Loomer. And who, Laura Loomer is somebody who sees conspiracy theories everywhere. And, probably thinks that, Antifa was behind the whole Cracker Barrel logo change. And yet she's listening to this woman who's a total abject liar and a convicted sex trafficker, which supposedly is something that people like Laura Loomer care deeply about. And but she totally buys everything she says. So I'm missing something. And
there's one more thing. What about Jim Jordan? Jim Jordan went on Fox News over the weekend and said, see, this clears Donald Trump. And we knew it. I'm like, weren't you involved in a sex scandal yourself as a wrestling coach that you didn't report anything? Meanwhile, young men were being, and there was no suggestion he did anything personally, but there was a lot of suggestions he knew what was going on because people said they came forward and told him they were being abused and he did nothing. So there he is vouching on Fox News. And you would think that's a day where Jim Jordan would be like, I'm away. I'm just not available on Sunday. But he went on to defend Trump and it became laughable. He was almost smirking. Like, well, I'm not even kidding. He was like, and this obviously shows Donald Trump did nothing wrong. She's saying it. Like, seriously, just start laughing. Just like live in New York at Saturday night at the end of it.
I mean, a little blast from the past, Dean, but do you remember a certain judge named Roy Moore, who he was a Senate candidate that Donald Trump was all in for, and Roy Moore was dating, I guess, teenage girls. Dating is a very, I guess, quaint Southern way of describing it, but he actually got banned from a mall for picking up teenagers. Like he was hanging out at Dippin' Dots, and like at the earring kiosk, picking up teenage girls, and he got kicked out of a mall, and yet he got an endorsement from Trump. So here's the interesting thing, Dean.
Well, by the way, did you know Roy Moore is the old man in the Cracker Barrel logo?
Of course he is.
Just want to put that out there because
now I know why it was always creeping me out, that logo.
That's Roy Moore.
Go there.
Sorry.
Roy Moore, yeah, he's very much, he's of a certain type of, and then of course, let's not forget the late great Matt Gaetz, who was almost our Attorney General. He sort of had some issues in this area. I just think it's really interesting how QAnon and a certain MAGA faction, a pretty large one, are obsessed with pedophilia. And I think that psychologists have a term for this, which is projection. They're really obsessed with it in a way. And don't get me wrong, I am very much in the anti-pedophilia camp.
Thank you.
But it's not the first thing that pops into my head every time I open my mouth. It's mainly, it seems like something that, for whatever reason, and I don't want to, make any accusations here, but for whatever reason, it's very much on the minds of people in the Republican Party. We'll just leave it there, I guess, as they say.
No, we should not leave it there because you make an excellent point. No, because Andy, they talk about grooming and sex with children all the time. Like it's always on their mind. And I don't know, because we're like, why are you saying gay teachers are grooming kids? Like, why would you even think this kind of stuff? Because there's not data to back that up. Or, the child sexualling out of a pizza parlor. Remember that one? And everything else that deals with children and sex and QAnon has something to do with it. They have an obsession. And I don't know if it, I'm not being glib, but I don't know if it's projection. I don't know if it's something in their own lives. I don't know if they're taught like, well, we can only agree on one thing, that child sex is bad. Everyone, yeah, okay, so let's make that our thing to talk about. It escapes me why that's on the forefront of their mind all the times. Because us, like, that's one of the last things, I don't even want to think about it. And if someone did something, they should be prosecuted full extent of the law.
Yeah, well, it is, let's just say it is very peculiar.
Yeah.
It's a very strange thing to latch on. I mean, there were certainly a lot of people, Republican evangelicals, who were very anti-gay, who later then turned out amazingly to be gay. So I mean, I always think it's that whole thing of protesting too much. If you're constantly hammering away, I mean, I guess you could say that deep down, maybe I'm Donald Trump because I'm always attacking Donald Trump. So maybe I'm going to rip off my latex mask at some point. But leaving that aside, I do think that it's a very strange, we can sort of judge people by their preoccupations. And I think it's interesting. I don't have any evidence. It's just a very peculiar psychological fixation that they have.
It is. It's also interesting, the idea that you have now projected that perhaps you are Donald Trump. And we didn't know this about A&E because it's sort of like Fight Club. Is there really two of them? Maybe there's
Oh my God.
you're Tyler Durden.
This
And
is just blowing my mind
that
because
right, that kind of thing where Brad Pitt and Ed Norton are the same person. And maybe somehow, all right, let's move aside from there and
yeah.
continue on. I don't think I've asked you this. Deep down, what do you think Trump's involvement is with Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein? And what I mean is it simply like he knew nothing? That's one scenario. The other is he knew something was going on, didn't turn in anyone. He didn't want to get involved. They're all rich white people. Or was he involved in the actual sex with children or some other area?
I am going to check box C, I guess. Did you give me three choices?
Well, no,
Uh,
you can do whatever. You can order
I
off the menu, whatever you'd
I
like.
have a very simple, and if I can be serious for a moment, because none of this is funny. Warning, what I'm about to say is not funny. I have a very simple rule when it comes to these things, like sexual allegations in general, which is I believe the women. And I know it's become very, I don't know, it's become a very kind of quaint, antiquated thing to say now because that whole Me Too thing, when the corporate media report about Me Too now, they say like during the height of the Me Too craze, as if it was this thing that happened and then we all got over it. And
Right.
not so sure that women really got over it, to tell you the truth. If you talk to women, and I hate to generalize about all women, but the fact is, the reason why so many people came forward during the Me Too era is because they suddenly felt that they had the numbers sufficient to give them some safety to do so. And there is a woman who goes by the pseudonym Katie Johnson, who
Hmm.
is very much on the record as saying she was raped repeatedly by Trump and assaulted by Trump. And a wonderful journalist, well, she's not a journalist actually, she's a philosopher on Substack by the name of Kate Mann, who
Hmm.
teaches at Cornell. Actually, she did something that the corporate media has not taken the time to do. She listened to and watched Katie Johnson's testimony about her deposition that she gave about what Trump did. And she actually produced a transcript. So you can find it on Substack. Kate Mann's Substack is called More to Hate. I'd actually like to have her on my show at some point to get more information about it. But if when people come forward with accusations like that, allegations, as E. Jean Carroll did, for example,
Right. Hmm.
the first reaction of the right-wing Republican mob is to say, well, they're gold diggers, they're looking for their 15 minutes of fame or whatever. And that shows complete disregard for the facts, because the fact is, most rapes are not reported
Hmm.
because of the retribution and the consequences that the woman or the girl who comes forward will suffer. And also, the other thing we should just be clear, and I'm going to continue on this very unfunny tirade for a moment, is that when we talk about underage girls or underage women, let's call them what they are. They're children.
Yep.
We talk about who is being raped by Epstein and his crew. They're children. They're not like young women or young ladies or under it. They're children. So that's what we're talking about. And that's when people like Laura Loomer and the media that, Jim Jordan, when all these people decide that they're going to side with Trump and say, oh, we don't need the Epstein files, blah, blah, blah. They're basically defending someone who's being accused very credibly of raping a child. Now, do I have proof? No, I don't have proof, because the problem with most sexual assaults is sexual assailants don't do it with like 5 other people in the room. They don't do it with like a camera rolling. I mean, if they do, they're really unfortunate. But the fact is, it always becomes kind of in this realm of he said, she said by their defenders, but it really isn't, because for her to say something, for her to step forward, and I'm not just talking about Katie Johnson, but any of these accusers, they're overcoming tremendous fear. It's such a courageous act to do, because they know how tough it's going to be on them if they do come forward. So that's the box I check. I'm going to end my very unfunny tirade now, but I tend to believe the women. They're if you look at the history of rape allegations, first of all, very few rapes are reported compared to the number that happen, and there are very, very few false accusations by the numbers. It's this myth that so many women are coming forward and just making fake allegations. It does happen, but the numbers are not on the side of that being the case in general. It's generally an act of tremendous courage to accuse somebody of rape, and that's why so few women actually come forward and do it, because they're terrified.
Sure, especially against someone with a lot of power and money.
Yeah.
Who will destroy their lives through the
Right.
lawyers and through, if this case goes to trial, but even just in the media smearing them. And I'm chatting with our friend Andy Borowitz, who I like that you gave a warning that following is not going to be funny, which I opened my set with that, I understand him. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, the following will not be funny. If it is funny, it's not because of me. It's because you thought of something that was humorous, but let's continue. So let's shift gears that something was both funny and slash not alarming with a big A, but alarming a little bit. But it was Trump's 3.5-hour cabinet meeting where he has clearly no place to go. I mean, I got to be honest with you. He's got nothing to do. And the sycophants, the praise, like I'll read a little for people. The labor secretary, Laura Chavez de Reamer, said Trump should come to the Department of Labor building, quote, to see his big, beautiful face on a massive banner she had hung. So if you haven't stopped, I invite you, Mr. President, to see your big, beautiful face. And it's a huge banner where like dictators are like, where did you get that? Like that. That's impressive.
Kim Jong-un is jealous.
Right. And then Steve Witkoff said that your team is nothing short of incredible. One thing, the Nobel Award, not the Peace Prize. And he said that you deserve it. No one's deserved it more. And when he finishes his little rant, the word, I'm not even kidding, cabinet officials were heard to mutter the word amen at the end of his spiel of Witkoff. This is what happened, like in America. Like this is like out of a movie, but it's real. And where do we go? What do we do from this?
Well, Trump is just a gaping chasm of neediness. I mean, when you see this, it's like, I'm happy when I do a Substack and I get like some likes on it. That's fine for me. But I mean, he in a way does kind of mirror our society right now. We have this kind of attention economy and people can't get enough attention. And he's in a way the perfect exemplar of that, because it's like an addict. He just has this hole that he cannot fill. And we have to be subjected to hours of him trying to satisfy this addiction he has. It's really sad. But speaking of incredible, it's interesting that Steve Witkoff used that term, because I find Steve Witkoff incredible. This is a guy who's been racking up more frequent flyer miles than Henry Kissinger, and he has not solved a fucking thing. Like, there are wars everywhere. And when Trump says like, oh, I've solved 6 wars, including in the Republic of Congo. He actually invented yet another African country in addition to Nambia, which he did during his first term.
Congo? Is that next to the Republic of Co-op?
I actually made a flag for the Republic of Congo that we
did?
What's it look like? It has like kind of a nice a tower building. Yeah. So it's embarrassing. To do a little '90s nostalgia, a little throwback. Ross Perot used to talk about that great sucking sound. And the great sucking sound was coming from the cabinet room this week. It was just the suction was impressive. It's like I thought that no one could outdo Mike Pence in terms of how
Right.
much of a suck up he is. And it turns out we're now into like a major reboot of the Mike Pence cinematic universe. I mean, this is like I don't know, the Avengers like
Oh,
of suction. So it was bad, but Dean, I'd like to leave those losers, if I may call them that,
sure.
in the rearview mirror and talk about somebody who did a great job this week.
Who's that?
That's our boy JB Pritzker.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, our boy. Can you tell me a little bit about, 'cause, you wrote a great column about this, where you basically said, and I agree with you, that JB Pritzker punched Trump in the face repeatedly,
Yeah.
repeatedly.
I've written a whole series of articles in Trump's second term about people who punch Trump in the face. What I mean by that, because I don't think like fighting back's enough. Like and of course it's air quotes it's quotation mark punch. But to me, punch is someone who grabs some press from Donald Trump, furthers a media narrative that is helpful to Democrats, hurtful to Donald Trump. And in this case, Pritzker gave a great speech on Monday, flanked by religious leaders, local elected officials, the mayor, members of Congress, senators, saying to Donald Trump that we don't want you here. You're not invited here. He made it really important point that this is not about crime. This is about control. You want us in the military to intimidate and silence political dissent in this city where we don't need you. Crime has gone down. He went through the statistics. But I love that Pritzker took the real truth here. He said Trump's goal is with the military is to end elections in 2026, to get ready for either stealing the election. He can go into details, but he goes, his end game is to end elections in America. And that's important to talk about so that we get ready for the end game. So people are not caught off guard. Gavin Newsom yesterday in a Politico, the Sacramento summit, said a very similar thing, that Trump doesn't want any more elections. What do you think of the idea of Democrats saying the worst case scenario out loud? Do you think there's a chance that it makes people who believe it go like, what does it even matter then if I vote? Or does it work people up to be more, I'm going to be more vigilant in protecting my rights, and also getting people psychologically ready? Because Timothy Snyder in his book on tyranny talked about the tyrants want you to freeze. They want you to be paralyzed by fear when the unthinkable comes. But if you prepare for what could be the unthinkable, that won't happen. You're like, oh, see, he's doing what we thought he's going to do. And now we have a whole checklist of ways to combat it. So where do you come down in this?
I think it's complicated.
It is.
Let me tell, because I have mixed feelings about this whole issue of saying there will be no more elections. Because this week I published a piece a couple days ago. Actually, it was really just yesterday, talking about how to deal with all the demands that are being made for you to make political donations. All the stuff, all the spam you're getting on your phone saying, vote, get Roy Cooper needs your money, Gavin Newsom needs your money, and a lot of it's coming from PACs you've never heard of, and how do you sort it all out and everything. And I gave what I thought were some helpful tips that I got from experts on what's the most effective way to make your donations. But one caveat I included was I said, don't buy into the narrative that it doesn't matter what we do because there won't be any more elections. And this is a very specific concern I have, because one reason why Trump and the right wing and really the totalitarian fascist regime that we've got in the White House right now keeps on saying things like maybe we won't have more elections, or maybe this will be the last election you'll ever vote in, or whatever. They want to freeze people into a state of passivity and inaction. And so, like, I'll say to people, who are you going to work for? What are you doing? What protests are you attending, and all of this? And sometimes well-meaning people will say, well, none of it matters because there won't be any more elections. So there's a danger here.
I agree.
We say there are no more elections, then people in the potential resistance side of things, the opposition, are just going to give up and be hopeless. But I like to use critical thinking here. If there aren't going to be any more elections, why are the Republicans so busy gerrymandering? it seems like a big waste of time and money if there really aren't going to be any more elections. So I like to sort of break it down like this. I would say at this stage of the game, the Republicans very much intend for there to be elections, and they very much intend to rig them. I think that's where we are now.
Right.
That's with Trump at about 37% in the polls. Now, if Trump gets down to 27%, which is kind of where Nixon was in the last days of Watergate, then I could think there could be a potential for him calling a national emergency, saying suddenly we're Ukraine, we have to suspend all the elections like they do in Ukraine because we're in a state of war. And that's going to be really the job of us taking to the streets along with the governors of states who care about democracy. And because actually elections are still run by the states, that's an inconvenient truth for Donald Trump that he's going to have to overcome. So governors like Newsom and Pritzker, but not just them, there are lots of other governors who will come to the fore. If we get to that kind of DEFCON 1 situation where he is actually trying to cancel the elections, then we're going to have to actually show up in numbers to protest that. There may have to be general strikes. There may have to be, I don't want to make a lot of vague threats. I'm just saying within the limits of the law and our First Amendment rights, we may have to come out in numbers to prevent our democracy from being taken away from us. But shy of that, if we're just in the phase, and I say just, if we're just in the phase where there are elections, because as you and I have discussed in previous episodes, these tyrants need elections usually to have some claim of legitimacy. It's like Kim Jong-un and Putin both have elections. It's kind of it can be a very rigged kind of plebiscite, but they need to have some kind of fake show that the people are behind them. So my guess is that there will be elections that the Republicans will try to rig and cheat and steal. However, I'm reminded by something that Adam Schiff said to me. It was in 2018. I hosted a show and I interviewed Adam. And at that point, the biggest concern was Russian interference in the elections. We were worried about foreign, which is, by the way, still very much an issue.
Sure.
We're still very worried about the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians. Foreign interference in our elections is an ongoing threat. But what Schiff said, which I thought made a lot of sense, is so we just have to come out in such numbers. We have to just flood the ballot box in such an extreme way that it becomes impossible to fake it. And I still think that's legal. I think that that's within our capacity. But what it means is that Democrats and independents who want a democracy are going to have to get out of this circular firing squad and stop complaining about, well, I don't like the way this Democrat was too weak or this Democrat. I mean, I know that we both share concerns about the Democratic leadership, which is very problematic right now.
It is.
We're really going to have to unify to save democracy. If we wind up having elections that are very imperiled by a fascist regime that wants to rig the results, we're going to really have to turn out in huge numbers, and we can't just sit in our hands and say, well, I guess I'll vote for Jill Stein or whatever nonsense.
That's not so. Well, I think you made a great point, because I do have a concern when people go, it doesn't matter. They'll call my show and say, well, it doesn't matter. The elections are not going to happen. I'm like, they're going to happen. Don't say that. We have to plan for the election. That's what we have to do. We have to plan to maybe do general strikes. Like you said, I'd love to take days off. This is great. I'm not going to work. I'm doing a general strike for the whole month of September. If I had my way, I don't know if SiriusXM would like that, but I'm kidding. But those kind of things. Sure, that's going to happen. But the one thing we can control is make sure we come out to vote, friends, family, everybody comes out to vote. And then the lawyers from DNC and other places, they know what's going on. It's not like this is all in a vacuum. Trump is out there in the open, and they are planning for election. I mean, today Donald Trump floated something that was actually very democratic. It's not a norm. It's breaking a norm, but it's fine. He said we should do a Republican National Convention next year before the midterms, which is actually a great idea. And that shows that you want to get your base to come out and vote. So you still you're investing in democracy. And I think that's good. And I think Democrats should do the same thing. Have a couple of day thing where the national media commits to give some airtime, like the DNC every 4 years, and you lay out your midterm agenda and what you want and why. And I don't care if he's breaking a norm there. That's not a bad idea. I have to be honest. Not, I think he's awful, but I like any idea that's about democracy. When he's talking about democracy, I'm like, okay, and it's actually a clever idea, and Democrats should steal it. If he doesn't do it, we should do it. That's how good of an idea I think it really is. It could be, but if they do it, we have to do it. And it's just doing a 2 or 3 day convention in the middle of next summer, and the media. It's a media event, and it's a free. It's not free. You're spending money to make it happen. But that's the kind of stuff that I actually like. Those. I think those are. We should do more of that. Democrats leaders, I'd love them to think out of the box, not just think.
The one thing if we're thinking out of the box, the one thing I would like to see the Democrats do is if they do their convention, I think it should be held at Taylor Swift's wedding. I think that would be the way to do it. Because Taylor, she is a Democrat. Let's
Right.
So there's
And I think her husband to be is too.
Yeah, so I mean, I think they're gonna have tremendous viewership for that. I know it's not currently planned as a televised event, but it is in a way. She did her Eras tour, and now this is a new era for her. She's going to be married Taylor, and I think that what better way than to invite her many Democratic friends? I mean, I think perhaps J.B. Pritzker could officiate at the wedding would be nice.
That would be. You think she'll do a tour for the wedding, like in any event, like?
I think she'll eventually, maybe 20 years from now, do an Eras tour where she does the many eras of her marriage. The honeymoon. Because she'll be doing albums, and now the albums are going to be. She won't be able to do. She needs new material now because she won't be able to do albums about heartbreak and boys that she didn't, that she got together with or broke up with. She's just going to have one guy. It's just going to be Travis. So she's going to need to have the era where they had kids and the era where, his mom came to live with them or whatever. She's going to just need new material. So
what rhymes
anyway.
What rhymes with Medicare? What rhymes with
What better way to kick it off than to have it be kind of an infomercial for the Democrats?
I love that. Great idea, Andy. Let's take a quick break. We're going to come back more with our friend Andy Borowitz right after this. And welcome back. Look who's still here. Andy Borowitz has remained writer, comedian, New York Times bestselling author, and of course a Substack that is wildly popular called The Borowitz Report. I signed up for a long time ago. I've been following Andy. Andy, we probably know each other. I think we say this every time, but it was definitely, I did a one-man show 5 years after 9/11 called We Come in Peace about being Arab American and Muslim. And you came to that show, and I think I met you a short time before that or something. So
yeah. It's been about 20 years.
We should have a tour, 20th anniversary tour.
Exactly.
But I did, Andy, many of your shows, you produced comedy shows and were nice enough to ask me to be in them. And I remember being in them with Aziz Ansari was in them.
Oh, yeah.
Ed Helms, I think, was he in one? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people become famous, and then there's me.
We all have roles to play in this
we
meeting.
Do. There's no small roles.
We had some good times, and we're still having good times.
We are. We're just right. We're going to keep doing this all the time. So, I find this interesting. So in the Trump administration, and even the mayor of D.C. is saying, well, crime has gone down in Washington, D.C. since the military occupied the streets. I'm like, Andy, let me get this. In a police state, doesn't crime tend to go down? Like if you're going to have the military occupying a city, I would imagine at least in the beginning until the criminals figure out how to get around the military, they're like, let's just lay low. Let's case the joint. Like they're saying it like it's a good thing. That's not a justification to put the military in every street of America. Oh, we're bring crime down.
No, crime goes down. You know what else goes down in a police state? Tourism. Because people don't I don't know if you've been to a pleasure trip to to Pyongyang recently, but it's not a fun place. I mean. Right. I was in New York City right after 9/11 and, seeing, soldiers everywhere with machine guns, it was a little bit reassuring because we'd just been, attacked by terrorists. So you do want to see a military presence, but it doesn't really make you want to go out to a Broadway show. It's just
right.
It's a little bit of a buzzkill in general. So yeah, I mean, I think the irony in all this, and I've just thought about this the other day, was that, if tourism goes down in a lot of these cities where Trump actually owns hotels, he may have to declare more bankruptcies. He already has 6 bankruptcies. And there's that big hotel in Washington, D.C. where he was, forcing all these government people to stay and diplomats and stuff. I mean, he may be losing more money as a result of his kind of desire to be Kim Jong-un. So yeah, it's not a great thing for a city. In general, this is another question I just have about all these corporations, and especially the media corporations that are sucking up to Trump and being so obsequious and so obedient. Do they really think that being a part of a police state is good for their bottom line? The answer is no. It's like living in a command economy where the government rigs all the figures and they rig the statistics and they rig the interest rates, which Trump wants to do. It's disastrous for business because they can't make decisions based on reality. They don't know what reality is. And if you're living in Trump's reality, like his statistics, his unemployment numbers, his job numbers, you're really flying blind because you're making up your plans, your business plans, according to lies. So it's a very interesting form of short-term thinking, like the companies like Paramount, who are, the new guy who owns Paramount is like appointing an ombudsman to CBS News to make sure that they get the news right.
I
Uh,
know.
so it's very interesting short-term thinking. In a way, it's very American thinking because one criticism of American corporations, really going back decades, is that they're real short-termers. They just think in terms of getting through the next quarter. They don't have a long-term plan.
But
And
you have to have no memory either, because if you're going to be like, oh, Trump is good for us because he likes us now, well, tomorrow he could hate you and have
well,
the
that's
DJ
usually
investigate you. I mean, that's like it's like Saddam was saying, like the same type of things with the inner circle. And then all of a sudden you said one thing wrong, or he just wants to make an example of someone. So he picks someone to make the example of. Trump will do that in a heartbeat. So
well, yeah. I mean, I just read Ruth Ben-Ghiat's great book, Strongmen, and she
yeah,
points out that
sure.
this is a feature of every dictator, every tyrant. Like you're good until the purge, and then you're not good anymore. Then you're actually not here anymore. And so it's a very interesting strategy. It's also what they're doing is appeasement, and history tells us that appeasement doesn't work. And so Trump is appeasing Putin right now.
Mhm.
That's the whole objective of his trip to Anchorage, was to appease Putin and just to show that Putin owns him. It didn't accomplish anything. Russia is now attacking civilians every day. I should do a warning. This is also not going to be funny, but there's been this unrelenting attack on Kyiv and on civilians on residential blocks since Trump went to Anchorage. So what a diss to Trump. I mean, it's like saying like, I didn't give a shit. Anything you said, Steve Witkoff, forget about him. I am not going to make peace with Ukraine. So Trump is busy sucking up to Putin, and then his cabinet is busy sucking up to him. So by the transitive law of sucking up, they are now sucking up to a war criminal. So I hope they feel great about that. I hope like little Marco and Howard Lutnick and Steve Witkoff, I hope they all feel awesome about the fact that they're sucking up to a war criminal, Vladimir Putin.
Do you think in your heart that this ends for the Trump regime ultimately with some type of Nuremberg type trials?
Well, I've been pushing for that.
Oh, you have. Interesting.
Earlier this year, I did a series called America's Top Traitor, and every week
I
I
remember.
profiled a different one of these guys. And there were too many to profile, Dean. I profiled maybe around 12 of them, including people like Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick, even the minor players, Christy Noem, of course. And I really do think, in all seriousness, there should be some sort of series of tribunals, because if not, what is the deterrent? We need to actually put a price on the depredations that they've committed against the United States Constitution. Otherwise, what value is the Constitution if it's just there? And by the way, some of the people who should be in the dock of these tribunals would be the supermajority of the Roberts Supreme Court, definitely, because they've been major enablers in this. There's a term which I love. It's the term quisling that grew out of World War II,
Mhm.
which is named actually after one of the biggest traitors. People think it's just a made-up word, but it's not. You can Google who this quisling gentleman was.
Joey Quisling?
Yeah,
No,
he's
I don't.
he's a bad guy.
There is.
But we have a whole, when you go down the list of like Little Marco and Mitch McConnell, all these people who have brought us to this state, I think to just give them all a pass and just say, oh, we're just gonna let's let bygones be bygones. It won't have the deterrent force that's required that the situation requires, in my view.
And I've written articles for Substack about and talked about on my show the need for a Nuremberg type trial, and that the International Criminal Court, while the U.S. is not a signature, if U.S. officials commit crimes on nations that are, such as El Salvador, Uganda, then they can be charged. So if they send the people to their death, knowing they're going to be tortured against in a crime against humanity in El Salvador, they theoretically be charged. We'll see if I don't know if they'll ever get charged, but they should. That's the problem. I mean, there's no skin in the game. That was another point, Jeffrey Pritzker, when he said in his speech on Monday that the Trump officials and federal agents, he said, if you hurt my people, I'm going to come for you because I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what position I have in politics. We're going to protect our people here. And I think that's an important message because they believe Trump can pardon them, which is true, but only for federal crimes, not for state crimes. So if they commit assault or they commit an invasion, which is a violation of state law in Illinois by coming over the border with troops from other states and stuff like that, they can be charged under state law. No, there's no, they can make some immunity argument, but they'll still be charged and be held, and they can argue in court, but there's no pardon for them. So I think that's important. They need to know they can lose something because right now, if you're in the Trump world, you do whatever Trump wants, and there's no disincentive because you're like, well, what's the downside? We don't achieve it. But if it's, I might go to jail when Trump is gone in a blue state, maybe it affects conduct.
Yeah, and you know, again, to go back to Ruth Ben-Ghiat's book, there are consequences to these actions. No, I mean, I think if you look at North Korea, that's an example of a dictatorship that's lasted really historically for a long time. It's 3 generations now of the Kim family, but they're very much the outlier. I
Right.
mean, there are some long-lasting dictatorships, but I would say that the Trump one is particularly fragile because there isn't really a good heir apparent. I mean, I know that the tech bros would love to see JD Vance in there, that, as I call him, that human ball of charisma. I mean, he is the most, he will make, you know, H.W. Bush look like a dynamo in terms of an inheritor of a
Right.
personality cult. I mean, they are going to be in such, there's going to be such a gigantic vacuum when Trump goes. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen Trump lately. He doesn't seem like he's going to be hanging out forever. It seems that his time will comes for all of us, but he doesn't seem like he's the most robust individual I've ever seen. But I think that when this is all over, and like all things in the universe, it will be over at some point. It's a question of how long it will take and how much damage will be wrought before it's over. There has to be consequences for all these people.
And a thing that was just stunning is an article you sent me about in the state of Washington,
Oh my
Border
God.
Patrol checking immigration status of people fighting a forest fire. And I'm like, this can't be real. Is this the Onion? And
No, it's almost like an editorial cartoon. You
right.
know,
So
like,
what caught your eye and what do you want to share about it? I thought it was very intriguing.
well, I just, you know, came up in my feed, and you know, just on Google News actually, you know, it's a story that some, I guess, some independent contractors at the behest of the state of Washington were actually battling a wildfire, and some federal immigration agents started checking their credentials while they were trying to put out a fire. So that's a great example of an imaginary crisis taking, you know, superseding a real crisis. There's actually, the country is on fire, and this, you know, imaginary crisis is being prioritized over that. And we're seeing this time and time again, Dean. We're seeing it with what's going on with the CDC and the FDA and all the FEMA, God knows. We're now marking the 20th anniversary of Katrina, and Katrina was a great example of a Republican president putting a loyalist in charge of FEMA, who is, I don't know if you remember Brownie, Michael Brown.
Brownie, great job, Brownie. Heck of a job,
Heck
right?
of a job. Do you remember what was Brownie's main resume item before he became the head of FEMA?
Would you tell me? I'll remember it, but I can't independently.
He was, I believe, chairman or president of the American Arabian Horse Association.
That sounds familiar. Right.
And so he was put in charge of FEMA. And, you know, of course, now he seems super qualified compared to, say, Pete Hegseth, you know, and all these clowns, RFK Jr. But this is the problem, again, that autocrats have. They always get rid of people with expertise. they get rid of the whistleblowers, they get rid of the knowledgeable people, and they put in loyalists, often who are intentionally incompetent. Trump doesn't want anyone around him who's going to outshine him. So he has people like
Bill
Scott
Barr.
Bessent, Scott Bessent, who is a vacuum of charisma. I mean, he walks into a room and he sucks up other people's charisma. He is so great. So that's who Trump wants around. He wants these people like Bessent and Lutnick and Witkoff, who are complete tools and completely these men in gray who just vanish.
I think Rubio's gotten smaller since he's been Secretary of State.
He
I
is
think he's like
little. He is
3'2"
now
now.
littlest. He's
Right.
littlest, Marco.
He's a little as Mark Rubio. Trump carries around in his pocket.
Let's call him microbe now. He's microbe.
He really has just got, you see him in the meetings, he's small. I think they put a booster chair for the guy because as his spine has just disintegrated.
I know.
There's
I
nothing
like
left.
again, I keep on quoting Ruth Ben-Gia, but I
She's
talked to her
great.
the other day and she said he's been broken. Trump has broken him. And I mean, it's
No,
so
I've known Ruth for many years. I had her on in the first term because we both used to write for CNN at the same time, opinion stuff. And I had her on before anybody knew her. And she was talking about Trump is going from the authoritarian playbook, and people didn't know what it was because we didn't understand it. And she was working on her book, it had not come out. And then now, the idea of the banality of evil is also the banality of the fascists and the tyrant. They're unoriginal. They copy each other all the time. And you see where they're going in the playbook because
it's
it
amazing.
works. Yeah.
You almost, when I read her book, I almost felt like Trump had read it, and then I remembered that he doesn't read. So maybe somebody read it to him, like, Stephen Miller, when he tucks him in at night, reads him from Ruth's book. But it is, I guess I'm promoting it. It's called Strong Men. Everyone should read it. It's shocking how unoriginal, how derivative Trump is. He borrows from Mussolini and from all the African dictators with their gold palaces and everything. It's amazing.
Yep. He samples them. All right, before I let you go, Andy, where do you want people to follow you the best? Are you on social media? You're on Blue Sky or?
I'm on Blue Sky and Facebook, but I really, right here at Ye Olde Substack has been such, not just great for me to have this platform, but when I see people like you and Ruth and of course Heather Cox Richardson and Robert Reich and all these people who are really doing great stuff, and doing really what the corporate media should be doing what the corporate media did during Watergate, for example, when there still was a media with some backbone and with a robust enough business model to be courageous. I mean, that's one of the real untold stories of this era, is that the corporate media is so marginal as a profitable enterprise. It's one of the reasons they're so cowardly, because they're all like one lawsuit away from going out of business. And that's pretty disgraceful. And we're really going to need to do a pretty thorough reckoning to figure out how to fix the business model of the media. And figure out maybe these corporations should not be in the news business. Maybe it should be the people who are funded independently. I mean, I know that the Atlantic is for profit, but they have somebody with deep pockets behind them they're hiring a lot of journalists. I don't know what the answer is. That's not my job, but I sure know what I'm seeing in corporate media is not working.
Independent media is needed more. It's needed. It's vital now more than ever. Well, thank you, Andy. Thanks so much for spending a lot of time. It's always great chatting with you. Follow Andy on Substack. I look forward to chatting with you next month.
Yeah, should I be like Putin and say next time in Moscow?
Next time in Moscow. I hope that's a Moscow in America somewhere, because I'm not going to Russia. But thank you, my friend. Have a good day.